Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast. I am so glad you're here with us today. Usually when we start a deep dive, we're grabbing a stack of articles about, say, the future of AI, or the history of coffee, or maybe some obscure scientific breakthrough. We're used to looking at things that are, strictly educational or a bit curious. But today feels different.
It feels heavier.
It does. Today we're tackling a topic that is becoming universally relevant, yet somehow nobody really talks about it until they're absolutely forced to by circumstance. We're doing a deep dive into a source text titled Grief in the Algorithm, Managing Digital Legacies After Loss. And honestly, when I first saw that title, I thought, okay, this is going to be a technical manual. I expected a how-to guide on password managers.
And to be fair, there is plenty of that how-to in there, which we will definitely get to. But the source material is actually much more profound than just a technical manual. It's about the collision of two very different worlds: the deeply human, messy, timeless experience of grief, and the cold, binary, optimized world of code.
It's the intersection of technology, memory, and loss. And I want to set the scene for you right away because the text opens with this really powerful framing. For most of human history, grief had a location.
Right. It had geography. If you go back 50, even just 20 years, grief happened in physical spaces. It happened in the cemetery. It happened in a place of worship. It happened in the living room with the curtains drawn and, a casserole on the table. There were boundaries. You went to the grief. The grief didn't necessarily come to hunt you down.
Exactly. You had to physically drive to the gravesite. You had to pull the heavy photo album off the dusty shelf. You had agency in when you engaged with the memory. But now, the source material argues that grief has been interrupted.
Interrupted grief. That's the core term here. Because now the memory of the person you lost sits in your pocket. It's on the device you use to order groceries, check your work email, and watch cat videos. There is no boundary. You could be in a high-stakes board meeting or standing in line for a latte and buzz, a notification pops up.
And that is the hook for today. We aren't just talking about cleaning up a digital mess. We're asking, what happens to our digital selves, our data, our profiles, our DMs when we die? And more importantly, how does that digital debris, as the text calls it, impact the people we leave behind who are just trying to survive the loss?
The mission of this deep dive is pretty clear. The research suggests that most of us are currently passive victims of these algorithms. We let the software dictate when we remember and how we remember. The goal is to move from being a passive victim to an active curator.
I like that distinction, passive victim versus active curator. But I have to play devil's advocate for a second. Is curator really the right word? It sounds so clinical. If I just lost my spouse, I don't want to be a curator. I want to be a grieving husband. Does the text acknowledge that this creates work for people who are already exhausted?
It absolutely does, and that is a crucial point. The text acknowledges that this is labor. It's emotional labor compounded by administrative labor. But the argument is that if you don't do the curating, the algorithm will do it for you. And the algorithm, and I cannot stress this enough, does not care that you were sad.
It would have a grief mode.
It has an engagement mode. It knows you interacted with this person a lot in the past. It sees that as a signal to show you more of them. It interprets your sadness, your doom scrolling through their old photos as high interest, so it feeds you more. It creates a feedback loop.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like the machine is gaslighting you.
In a way, yes. The text uses the example of the frozen profile. In the physical world, entropy works. Flowers wilt, stone weathers, paper yellows. There's a visual language that tells us time is passing and the person is gone. But online, a profile picture from 5 years ago looks exactly as crisp and vibrant today as it did the day they uploaded it.
It's suspended animation.
It is, and psychologically, that messes with our ability to process the permanence of loss. The source material calls this the omnipresence factor. The dead aren't just in a better place. They're in the cloud, they're in the search results, they're in the tagged photos of a party you didn't even go to.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty of this interrupted grief. The text mentions specific examples of how the algorithm ambushes people. The most common one, and I think the one everyone dreads, is the birthday notification.
The birthday problem. It is ubiquitous.
You're having a normal Tuesday,
Yeah.
you're feeling okay, and then Facebook or LinkedIn chirps at you, it's John's birthday, wish him a great day, and John has been dead for 2 years.
That is the classic failure of context. The platform is designed for continuity. It wants you to engage, doesn't know how to stop. And for the survivor, that notification triggers a physiological response. It's a shock. It resets the grief clock.
And the text points out that this leads to some really complex emotions. It's not just sadness, it's guilt.
The guilt is fascinating. and heartbreaking. The source describes survivors who feel guilty for wanting to turn the notifications off. They feel like if they mute the alerts or hide the profile, they are erasing the person. They feel like they're being bad friends or bad partners.
Which is such a heavy burden. You're already grieving, and now you feel guilty because you don't want an app to yell at you.
Exactly. And the experts in the source material are very, very firm on this. Wanting to stop the ambush is not a betrayal. It is a safety need. You're protecting your nervous system. You are trying to reclaim the right to mourn on your own timeline, not the timeline of a push notification server in California.
Okay, so if we accept that we need to take control, that we need to become these active curators, where do we even start? Because the digital footprint is massive.
It is so much bigger than most people realize. The source suggests starting with a digital inventory. And this isn't just write down their email. This needs to be a forensic audit.
Forensic audit. Wow, that sounds intense. What are we looking for exactly?
Well, the text breaks it down into tiers. Tier 1 is the obvious stuff. Social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, X. Tier 2 is communication. Email accounts, messaging apps like WhatsApp or Telegram. But then you have Tier 3, which is what they call the invisible footprint.
The invisible footprint. What's that?
Cloud storage, Dropbox, Google Drive, iCloud, financial apps, Venmo, PayPal, any crypto wallets, and the one that catches everyone off guard, subscriptions.
Oh, the subscriptions, the zombie charges.
Precisely. You might have a monthly charge for a streaming service, a news site, a premium app, a gym membership. These things run on auto pay. If you don't catch them, they just drain the estate. The source recommends getting the last 12 months of bank statements and going through line by line.
That is a great practical tip. Don't just guess. Look at the money trail.
And here's a pro tip from the text regarding that inventory. The email account is the skeleton key. If you can get access to the deceased's primary email, you can usually reset passwords for almost everything else. If you are locked out of the email, you are in for a very, very difficult time.
Which brings up a huge technical hurdle, two-factor authentication. If I have their password, but the 2FA code goes to their phone, and their phone is locked, I'm stuck.
You are completely stuck. And this is where the legal reality hits the technical reality. We'll get to the legal side later, but for the inventory phase, the text advises looking for physical backups. Did they write codes down in a notebook? Is there a trusted device like an iPad that doesn't have a passcode? You have to be a bit of a detective.
Okay, let's zoom in on the big one, social media. The source material spends a lot of time here because this is really the public face of grief. When someone dies, their Facebook page or Instagram profile, it becomes a gathering place.
A digital wake.
Right. But eventually, you have to decide what to do with it. And it seems like there are three main paths: memorialization, removal, or,
Right.
well, or just doing nothing.
And doing nothing is a choice, but it leaves you vulnerable to the algorithm. So the
Right.
platform generally offer memorialization or removal.
Let's unpack memorialization. What does that actually mean technically?
Yeah.
Because I think people assume it just means keeping the photos.
It's more specific than that. When you request memorialization, say on Facebook or Instagram, you have to provide proof of death, usually an obituary or a death certificate.
Okay, so there's a verification process.
A pretty serious one. Once the platform accepts that, they lock the account.
Lock, as in nobody can log in.
Correct. Even if you have the password, once it's memorialized, you generally cannot log in as that user anymore. The profile gets a badge, you've probably seen it, usually remembering name. But crucially, it stops the algorithmic pushes, it stops suggesting them as a friend to others, it stops the birthday reminders, it freezes the content in amber.
So it becomes a digital grave,
Mm-hmm.
a place to visit, but it's not an active participant in the network anymore.
Exactly. And for many people, that is the best option. It preserves the history, but stops the ambush.
But then there's the second option, removal, deleting the account entirely.
The nuclear option, as some call it.
It feels harsh. I mean, scrubbing them from the internet.
It feels harsh, but the source emphasizes that for some people, it is absolutely necessary. If seeing that face pop up, even in a memorialized state, is causing severe trauma, deletion is a valid choice. Or sometimes it's about privacy. Maybe the deceased was a very private person and would hate the idea of their photos just lingering forever.
That's a really good point. We often project our own need to remember onto the deceased, who might have preferred to just fade away.
Precisely. There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Now, there's a third mechanism mentioned, the legacy contact. This is something we can set up before we die, right?
Yes, and if you take one thing away from this deep dive, please go do this today. A legacy contact is a person you designate to manage your account after you die. But, and this is a huge but, We need to be really clear about what they can and cannot do.
Yeah, let's get technical here, because I think people fear that if they set a legacy contact, that person will be able to read all their private messages.
That is the number one fear. I don't want my spouse reading my DMs from 10 years ago. The good news is, generally they can't. On Facebook, for instance, the legacy contact can pin a post to the top of the profile like funeral details. They can respond to new friend requests, and they can update the profile picture. They cannot log in as you, and they cannot read your past private messages.
So it's a safety lock, not a master key.
Exactly. It grants administrative power over the profile, not the data history. It's a very, very important distinction.
That is a relief. So we have the account options. But let's go back to that birthday problem. Even if I don't memorialize the account right away, how do I stop the notifications now?
This is the tactical self-defense part of the text. If you aren't ready to memorialize or delete, you have to modify your own experience. You have to go into your own settings.
Which feels unfair, right? I'm the one who's grieving, and I have to do the work.
It is unfair.
Yeah.
But it's effective. You can go into Facebook or Instagram settings and specifically mute on this day or memories. You can tell the algorithm, show me less of this person.
But then we hit that emotional wall again, the unfriend button.
Yes. The text discusses the unfriending dilemma. If you unfriend the deceased, the notifications stop instantly. It is the most effective technical solution, but emotionally, it feels like slamming a door in their face. It feels like an act of rejection.
I don't think I could do it. It feels like kicking them out of the tribe, you know?
And that is a very human response. But the expert commentary in the source offers a reframe that I found really powerful. They argue, disabling these notifications is an act of care, not avoidance.
How so? Explain that.
Because you are reclaiming the quality of your remembrance. Instead of remembering them because a robot buzzed your pocket while you were stressed out at work, you are choosing to remember them when you have the space and the capacity to do so. You are protecting the sanctity of the memory from the noise of the platform.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about being intentional.
Intentionality is the antidote to the algorithm.
This leads us perfectly into the next big concept from the text: curation versus erasure. Because if we're turning things off, we're deleting accounts or hiding photos, the big fear is, are we erasing the person?
And the source introduces the concept of curation to solve this fear. Think about a museum curator. A museum has thousands and thousands of artifacts in the basement. They don't put every single one on the wall at the same time. It would be chaos. They select the right pieces to tell a story.
So we need to become the curators of our loved one's digital life.
Yes. Curation means saving what matters and quieting the noise. It means you don't need to keep every blurry photo of a sandwich they posted in 2014, but you absolutely do need to keep the video of them laughing at their birthday party.
And how do we do that practically? Because trusting a social media platform to be your archive seems incredibly risky.
It is incredibly risky. Platforms die. Remember MySpace. Remember Vine. If your memories are stored solely on a third-party server, you don't own them. You're just renting space.
So backup, backup, backup.
The text recommends using the download your information tools. Every major platform has this now. Google Takeout, Facebook, Instagram. You can request a download of everything. Do that. Get the zip file, put it on an external hard drive, put it on a cloud service that you control and pay for.
Moving the memory from the public square to the private library.
Beautifully put. And there's a specific format note here from the source that I found really interesting. Audio. Voice notes.
Oh man, hearing their voice, that hits different.
It is the most visceral trigger. Text is abstract, photos are static, but audio is alive. The source urges people to prioritize saving voicemails and voice notes. But, and this is a technical snag, voice notes and apps like WhatsApp or iMessage can expire, or they're in weird proprietary file formats.
So what do? Just play it and record it with another phone?
If you have to, yes, that's the analog backup. But ideally, you export the file. Save it as an MP3, label it Dad Birthday Message 2024. Because 5 years from now, that WhatsApp chat history might be gone, but that MP3 on your hard drive will still play.
That is incredibly actionable advice. Don't let the voice disappear.
Now, this all sounds great if you're the only person making decisions. You're the curator-in-chief. But usually, grief is a group project, and group projects are messy.
Oh, the family drama. The source calls this the social dynamics of digital grief.
It's where the tech meets the tension. Because digital spaces are so often shared. Think about a Netflix account, or a shared Amazon Prime login, or a family photo stream.
Or the password to the Wi-Fi, honestly.
Even that. The text highlights a really common conflict: the password change. Imagine a widow. Her late husband managed all the tech. He dies. She, in a panic or just trying to secure things, changes all the passwords.
And suddenly the stepkids, who live in another state, are locked out of the family photos or the Netflix account they've been using for years.
Exactly. And to the widow, it was just a security measure. To the kids, it feels like they've been locked out of the house. It feels like the new regime is here and you aren't welcome.
It's not just a password, it's a connection.
So the advice is communication before action. Who needs access to this? Who is using this account? Don't just change the locks without checking who's still in the building.
Then there's the conflict of grieving styles. The text mentions the preserver versus the remover.
This is a classic dynamic. One sibling wants to preserve the deceased's Facebook wall exactly as it is. They want every comment, every post, frozen in time. They visit it every single day. The other sibling, they find it incredibly painful. They want it taken down. They want to move on.
Who wins that fight?
There is no winner. That's the hard truth. But the expert insight is that you have to find a layered compromise. This goes back to curation. Maybe you download the entire archive for the sibling who wants to keep everything, give them the hard drive. But you memorialize the public profile to stop the notifications for the sibling who needs distance.
You separate the data from the display.
Exactly. The source has a great line. Honoring multiple grieving styles reduces secondary harm. The death is the primary harm. The fight over the Facebook password is the secondary harm. We want to avoid that if we can.
Let's talk about the most vulnerable people in this whole equation. Children. The source has a specific section on children and guilt in the digital age, and this part really got to me.
This is so critical. Kids today are digital natives, but they're also digital victims in this context. They often encounter these reminders accidentally. They're playing a game on mom's iPad or looking for a photo, and the widget rotates and shows a picture of grandpa who died last month.
And because kids grieve in bursts, they're fine 1 minute, then they're sad, then they're fine again. This must be so confusing for them.
It's ambush grief for a developing brain. The advice for parents is to be hyper-aware of shared devices. Curate the featured photos on the iPad. Turn off the Memories widget on the family screen. Do some preventative maintenance.
But you can't block everything.
No, you can't. And when it happens, you use it as a moment of connection. You validate it. Oh, there's Grandpa. He looks so happy there, doesn't he? But don't let the device dictate the timing of that conversation if you can help it.
The other side of this is the guilt, which we touched on, but I want to go a little deeper here. The text warns about the trap of believing that continued visibility equals continued love.
This is the psychological trap of the century. Social media has trained us that attention equals affection. If I like your post, I care about you. If I ignore your post, I am ignoring you. We transfer that logic to the dead.
So if I stop visiting his profile, I must be stopping loving him.
Exactly, and that is a lie. The expert reframe in the text is something I want every single listener to really hear. Love is not measured by algorithms.
Hey, Benny.
Love is not measured by algorithms. The depth of your grief has nothing to do with your browser history. You can love someone deeply and never look at their Facebook page again. In fact, stepping away might be the healthiest way to honor the real memory rather than the digital avatar.
That is incredibly liberating. I hope people hearing that can feel a weight lift off their shoulders.
It allows you to step off the hamster wheel of what some call performative grief.
Okay, we've done a lot of the emotional heavy lifting. Now we have to eat our vegetables. We have to talk about the business end of death.
The boring, gritty, frustrating legal stuff.
The text mentions that digital assets are a legal nightmare. Why is that? Why can't I just put, I leave my iTunes library to my son in my will?
Because, simply put, you don't own your iTunes library. You have a license to listen. When you die, the license technically expires.
Wait, really? So all those movies I bought on Amazon?
You bought a long-term rental. Now, most platforms will look the other way if you just share the password with your family. But legally, it's a mess. And that's just media. The bigger issue is access to accounts. The text draws a sharp line between a legal will and a terms of service agreement.
And the terms of service usually wins.
Almost always. You can put whatever you want in your will. But if Google's terms of service say we do not transfer accounts upon death, Google's lawyers will point to the little box you checked 10 years ago and say, sorry.
So what is the workaround? How do we deal with that?
The workaround is specific estate planning for digital assets. You need a clause in your will that specifically grants your executor the authority to access digital assets, accounts, and devices.
Does that actually work with the big tech companies? Will they honor it?
It helps. It gives your executor legal standing to at least ask. But the text warns that even with a court order, some companies fight back on privacy grounds. They'll argue, The deceased has a right to privacy, even in death.
Which brings us right back to that legacy contact feature.
Yes. That is why the platform-specific tools like Legacy Contact on Facebook or the Inactive Account Manager on Google are so important. They are the company's approved method. If you use their tool, you bypass the legal fight entirely.
So the toolkit step here is 1. Update your will to include digital assets. And 2. Set up the legacy contacts inside the apps themselves.
And 3, the analog backup. Write down your critical passcodes, not in a Google Doc, on a piece of paper, in a safe, or with your attorney. Because if the cloud locks you out, paper is the ultimate backup.
It's so ironic, isn't it? The solution to high-tech grief is a piece of paper in a safe.
Sometimes the old ways are the most resilient.
We've talked a lot about deleting and hiding and wrestling with lawyers, but the source material also talks about integration. It's not just about cleaning up, it's about creating something new.
The creative reconstruction phase. How do we use this technology to tell the story better?
The text explicitly mentions the funeral program site as a resource here. They're doing some really interesting things blending the physical and the digital.
They are. The concept is that a funeral program or a headstone is static. It has limited space. You can fit maybe 2 photos and a short poem. But if you integrate digital elements like a QR code, you open a portal.
A QR code on a headstone. I've heard of this.
Yes, it's becoming more and more common. You scan the code on the granite, and it takes you to a curated website, a video tribute, a digital guest book where people can leave stories 10 years later, a playlist of their favorite songs.
That is beautiful. It makes the memorial dynamic. It makes it a living document.
It creates a multi-layered tribute. You have the solemnity of the stone and the richness of the digital archive. It bridges the gap between those two worlds.
But again, we have to worry about link rot. Will that QR code still work in 20 years? Will the website still be there?
That is the risk. That's why the text suggests using a dedicated service like the funeral program site or others that specialize in this, rather than just linking to a YouTube video that might get taken down. You need a host that is committed to longevity.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground. From the initial shock of the notification, to the forensic inventory, to the legal battles, to these new creative memorials.
It is a lot to take in.
And I think the listener might be feeling a bit overwhelmed. Do I have to do all of this right now?
And the text gives a very emphatic, very clear answer. No.
Thank goodness.
Grief evolves. The way you feel 3 weeks after a loss is completely different from how you will feel 3 years after. The decisions you make today do not have to be permanent.
So I can memorialize the account now, and then maybe 5 years later decide to delete it if I want to.
In many cases, yes. Or you can archive all the photos now, keep them private, and then 10 years later realize you want to share them with the grandkids. The text says, flexibility honors the evolving nature of grief.
You don't need a digital strategy on day one. You just need to survive day one.
Correct. The strategy can wait. The inventory can wait. The only thing you might want to do quickly is secure that primary email account just for safety and security. The rest, take your time.
But the text also leaves us with a reality check. Even if we do everything right, we curate, we memorialize, we use the QR codes, we can't control everything.
No. The internet is a network. You are just one node. You can control your node, but you can't control the entire network.
The ambush is still possible.
It is. A third-party platform might change its algorithm next year. An old friend from high school might post a throwback photo 5 years from now without warning you.
So the goal isn't to eliminate every single trigger.
That is impossible. The goal is emotional resilience. It's about knowing that the digital world is leaky. It's about knowing that an ambush might happen, and knowing that when it does, it's just code. It's not a message from the universe. It's not a moral judgment. It's just code.
Grief does not disappear because notifications stop. It simply becomes more manageable. That's a powerful line from the conclusion.
It is the reality. We're not trying to use technology to fix grief. We're just trying to stop technology from making the grief worse.
So let's wrap this up with a summary of the toolkit we promised. If you're listening and you want to be an active curator, here is the checklist from the source.
Number 1, the audit. Check the bank statements for subscriptions. Find the email passwords. Get a sense of the landscape. Number 2, the triage. Decide on the social accounts. Memorialize, delete, or ignore. Remember, ignore is a choice, but memorialize is what stops the notifications. Number 3, the archive. Download the data. Get the photos off the cloud and onto a hard drive you control. Save the voice notes as MP3s. And number 4, the legal. Check the will. Set up the legacy contacts now, while you are alive.
And I'll add number 5, be kind to yourself. If you can't hit the unfriend button today, don't. If you need to stare at the green dot next to their name for comfort, do it.
Exactly. You are the curator. You set the rules for yourself.
I want to leave our listener with a final provocative thought, something to mull over that really builds on this source material. We spend so much time curating our lives online while we're alive. We obsess over our Instagram grid, our LinkedIn bio, our personal brand.
We are constantly telling the story of us.
But we rarely, if ever, think about the curation of our afterlife. We leave it to chance. We leave it to the algorithm.
It's the final act of storytelling, and usually we just leave the pages blank.
So here is the question for you listening right now. If you could curate your own digital legacy today, if you could decide exactly what stays and what fades away, what would you choose? Would you want the tweets to stay? The embarrassing photos? Or would you want a quiet digital silence?
It's a heavy question, but thinking about it now and maybe writing it down might be the greatest gift you can give your family later on.
Absolutely. Save them the guessing game. Give them the map.
Be the curator.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. I know it was a heavy one, maybe a bit darker than our usual fare, but I think it's one of the most important conversations we can be having in this digital age.
Take care of yourselves and take care of your digital self.
We'll see you next time.